So I've been thinking about getting rid of some of the gear in my studio. I've got some new pieces coming in, and what I don't want to do is I've got 2 or 3 extra racks up in storage, but I really don't want to clutter my space here with those. I had those down here in the beginning of the channel when I had my 24 channel D command back here, but it really opened things up a lot, so I don't really want to put that down in here. And there's some gear here behind me. My last video was talking about contemplating getting rid of my Avid S1 because I'm not using it. I've got a couple 1176 clones that I'm no longer using because I've got a new piece coming in that is a stereo unit, and I'm very excited about that. So anyway, I've been contemplating selling it, and so like I typically do when I'm looking to buy a piece of gear, I tend to go on Reverb, see what the see what the typical asking price is for a piece of gear. And then I think this is really important if you don't do this, that you go into your filter section, you make sure you're choosing only used, and then you're scrolling down to, I think it says other options or something like that. And then there you can click a box that said sold listing. So you can see what that particular piece of gear is sold for, over the last 6 months or so, and you get a good feel for that. I started looking around at some of the pieces. I know what I paid for that S1, and so when I went to look and see what people are actually getting for it, not what they're asking, but what they're getting for it, I found out just in, what has it been, 3-4 months ago that I bought that? The prices have already dropped, and I did buy that used for the record. So I was really surprised at that. So then I started looking up some other things just out of curiosity. And I'll give you, here's one piece of gear, and this has nothing to do with the piece of gear because this piece of gear is certainly a perfectly good piece of gear, but it just shows the state of where things are right now. Times are tough regardless of what you hear on the news and all the political crap that goes on out there. Times are tough for a lot of people. Things have gotten so much more expensive, and so disposable cash has dwindled quite significantly. So that means the opportunity to buy things is also dwindling, which means your opportunity to sell things is also dwindling, however you want to look at it. When I looked at this particular piece of gear, and it's the Universal Audio Apollo X6, I pulled that one up. Most people were asking used around $2,200 to $2,400 used for it. That's what they're asking, and that's where a lot of people get confused when trying to price their gear. One thing you want to look at is how many pieces are out there for sale. If you go to something and there's only two or three examples of that are being sold right now, odds are you're going to get more money for that item. However, let's just take something like a Gibson Les Paul or a Fender Strat. Those guitars are a dime a dozen, and so ultimately they have dropped tremendously in the used value market. I think an American Strat might go for $1,400, can sell for as little as $700 or $800 used today in perfectly good condition. And so anyway, that Apollo X6, they were asking around $2,200, but the average going price for it, now there were some that were higher, but there were lots of examples just in the last few months of where it sold for $1,400. That's a huge depreciation, a huge one. And I guarantee you, if I'd looked at that 6 months ago, I wouldn't have seen that type of depreciation, because you can see there's typically a chart. Once you click into one of these, it'll show you what it's historically sold for, kind of like a graph. And you can see where it's just starting up high and it just slowly is starting to dwindle down. This is not unusual in the used market because supply and demand. So that's not an unusual thing. But however, the gaps between these have become quite significant. And I think it's only going to get greater as summer comes closer and things like that. So here's my advice to you. If you've got a piece of gear that you're looking to sell right now, I think now's the time to probably do that. Waiting will simply most likely cost you money. And so that's my personal advice. Now, this is just my opinion. Who knows whether what I'm talking about is accurate or not. But I too tend to have a pretty good pulse on these things, and we're going to see this drop. I made a video probably about 2 years ago in a similar situation, and we saw that happen back then too. And that was really at the beginning of the crashing of the bubble of all these, super large sales that were happening within the music business because of the pandemic, because people were stuck at home. Well, now they're back to work and they don't have time, so they started unloading things and things started to drop. Now, it did rebound some bit. So here's what I think for manufacturers out there. I think obviously you need to wait and look for this trend and see how it's going. I'm sure you're not foolish. I'm sure you're already looking at these types of things. But ultimately, it's going to require a reduction of your prices of what you're asking. Now, typically, they don't like doing that because it affects their profit and loss statement, because they can write off discounts differently than they can writing off a drop in the retail price. So what we're going to start seeing on a lot of new gear, in fact, we've already begun seeing it like crazy. You're going to see a lot more sales going on now, back to getting up to 20% off pieces of gear new. That was fairly easy for the longest time. It got a little bit difficult during the pandemic, but I've always been able to get that. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens, but if you're looking to sell, now's the time to do it. If you're looking to buy, I'm not so sure now's the time to do it, and that's in the used market. When it comes to new stuff, there are some things that most people or a lot of people are not going to want to buy used. A lot of people are, just have an aversion to buying guitars, as an example, used. They like having them new. And I understand that if it's a major investment and you're really, getting a high-end guitar, if you're going to spend that much money, get exactly what you want, not what just happens to be on the market at the time. I can understand that. Certainly, I've got several guitars in here that fall into that case, and I also have guitars in here that don't fall under that. I just happen to get a great deal, and they're awesome guitars, and I love them. So I think when we look at all of this, I think for new gear, I think depending on what it is, I think now's the time. There are some things that you want to buy new, some things you want to wait and buy used, but that's a decision that you ultimately have to make. A lot of times, the benefit of buying new is, especially companies like Sweetwater as an example. If you have one of their credit cards, you can get 0% financing pretty easily. Not that I recommend going into debt for gear, because I don't, but for a lot of people out there, that's a viable option of doing that. And for young musicians, that's a good way to start building your credit. Ultimately, you've got that. Now, speaking of Sweetwater, I do have a relationship with Sweetwater. I'm part of their affiliate program, which means that I have a link down in the description below to this video, as well as my other videos, that will take you to Sweetwater. If you just copy and paste that, there's one universal link where you can go buy anything that you want, and I will get a small commission off of that. It's very small, but ultimately these things can add up, and I really appreciate it if you could help me out. Down below that, you're going to see a list of a bunch of gear that falls under things that I've either done reviews on, or pieces of gear that I've used or currently are using, that I give kind of the 2 thumbs up in that price range. So if you want to check that out, that'll take you directly to that particular product. So I'd appreciate it if you'd help me out. It really helps me because you don't make a lot of money off views when you do YouTube. And so ultimately, this is a way that keeps this channel going. And I appreciate it. For those of you, and many of you have begun using those links that I started a few months ago, and I really appreciate that. It's really helped me out tremendously. So thank you very much. Now, outside of that, do me a favor, leave some comments down below. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you're seeing, what your prediction is. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right. Only time will tell. I think I'm right. Obviously, I'm doing this video, but I very well could be wrong. And I hope I'm wrong for those people selling, but for those people buying, it's a good thing if I'm right, right? Right. Lots of rights there. But anyway, until next time, hope every one of you have a great day. And whatever you do, whether you buy used gear, whether you buy new gear, whatever gear that you get, use it, love it, enjoy it, and be creative with it, and also learn from using it. So until next time, I hope all of you have a great day. Bye-bye.